When you drive to and from work on today's modern transportation system, rarely do you think about the complexities of planning and building highways. Many of us think about the traffic and how long it will take to get from here to there. But before this highway was built or before any public project occurs, families and businesses must move to make way for the project. In this video, we want to look at assistance that must be offered to businesses displaced by public projects. Whether it's a new highway or any other public project, the Uniform Act requires government agencies to provide advisory assistance and moving cost payments. Each business has its own specific needs, but generally advisory assistance means an agency must provide services to minimize the impact of the move. For example, you might offer a list of potential business sites for relocation. You might also provide zoning information or help the affected business with filling out governmental claim forms. Section 205 of the regulations mandates certain minimum advisory services for business displacees. One of these mandates is that early in the relocation planning process, each business should be personally interviewed. This interview will take a considerable amount of time, but provides the basis of information needed for a successful relocation. The interview process is used to determine the needs and preferences of each non-residential displacee, and in particular, the interview must determine the replacement site requirements of the business, including its current lease terms and other contractual obligations that affect the business and its ability to move. Determine the need for specialized outside assistance for planning the move, conducting the move, and reinstalling the personal property. This might include payment to plan the layout of equipment or other personal property. There is occasionally confusion between a landlord and business tenant regarding ownership of certain items of realty or personalty. The agency must seek to resolve these issues prior to the appraisal of the property. A displacing agency must also estimate the time required for the business to move and reestablish itself at a new location. The information to make this estimate is gathered during the personal interview and should consist of the opinion of the business and the agency representative. The agency must anticipate and seek to resolve difficulties in locating replacement property. There is not a requirement that an adequate site be available for every business displaced, but the agency must be able to demonstrate that it has made a good faith effort to locate a replacement site for every business. And finally, a displacing agency must investigate the need for advanced relocation payments for a displaced business. These advanced payments are especially important for small businesses. Financial payments necessary to relocate a business and its personal property fall into three categories. They are reimbursements for actual moving costs, reestablishment payments, and fixed payments. Let's discuss the first of these payments, the actual, reasonable, and related expenses. There is no financial cap to these actual costs, and the benefits can be substantial. Public agencies are required to make reasonable and necessary payments to relocate the personal property of a business. Here are some actual costs an agency must pay in the relocation process. Transportation, picking up, hauling, and delivering items from one location to another. Packing, including crates, boxes, and pallets, anything that needs to be packed before being moved. This cost also includes labor to get the job done. Disconnects and reconnects. Both can potentially be significant payments. It means you must dismantle and reinstall equipment, machinery, and other items. More on this a little later. Storage. Occasionally, you must pay to store certain items that cannot be immediately moved. You can pay for replacement value insurance and pay for licenses or permits and certifications required of the business moving from one location to another. Losses. The performing agency can also pay the replacement value of personal property lost, stolen, or damaged in the move. Payments can also be offered for replacement signs and stationery made obsolete by the relocation. A business may also choose to abandon property, that is, not move specific items yet receive payment for them. Likewise, a business may choose not to move an item and replace it at the new location with a substitute item. You can assist with the purchase of this substitute. Payments are also available for sale costs such as advertising, if you require the business to sell items of personal property as part of the move.
The option to abandon items or substitute items provides great flexibility to the business. When the business operator fully understands their options, they find it useful.
Searching expenses such as transportation, meals, lodging, and certain fees. Searching expenses also include payment for time spent looking at replacement sites and for time spent obtaining permits and attending zoning hearings. It is sometimes less expensive to pay the value in place of an item or its replacement cost rather than move it. There are additional benefits authorized under Section 303 of the regulations for displaced businesses, farms, and nonprofit organizations. These are the actual, reasonable, and necessary expenses incurred by the business for the connection of nearby utilities from the right-of-way to the improvements at the replacement site, professional services needed for such activities as soil testing, feasibility studies, and marketing studies. The amount of these payments is subject to reasonable discretion of the agency as to hourly labor rates and the number of such studies. The studies and services must also occur prior to the purchase or lease of the replacement location. One-time utility impact fees to compensate the utility for anticipated heavy usage. These can include sewer, electric, gas, and other utilities. Let's look in more detail at one of the moving cost benefits, the disconnect-reconnect payments. Consider this example of moving heavy machinery. This metal lathe will require dismantling and disconnection of utilities. To prepare it for moving, someone knowledgeable about this type of machinery generally performs this work. The person is often referred to as a rigger or millwright, and he could be responsible for disconnection of compressed air, gas, water, electricity, or control connections. The machinery must also be lifted and moved to a truck for hauling. In this project, a forklift is used to move the lathe which had been placed on a pallet. Once the lathe is delivered to the new site, the installation and reconnection process begins. Pads or foundations to accommodate the equipment are sometimes needed. They are typically footings made of concrete. The machine is then anchored to those pads to prevent movement. Next, all of the services like utilities, water, air, and gas are connected. Finally, the equipment is ready to run at the new location. One of the complicating factors of moves such as this one is determining to what extent the provisions of utilities should be included as part of the move. The regulation provides some guidance, but it is designed to cover a large variety of circumstances. In this particular instance, the electrical distribution bus is real estate. In industrial plants such as this one, it is routinely valued as a part of the real estate. The individual electrical takeoffs from the bus are personal property, typically abandoned in place, and should be replaced as part of our moving payment. Additionally, when you move machinery, you could lose certain grandfathering for the installation or method of operation of the machinery. If you move across state lines or even to another city, various code requirements may dictate how the machinery is installed. The only legally proper way to reinstall a piece of equipment is in compliance with local codes. You may consider code-required modifications that are directly associated with a specific item of personal property to be part of the move cost. These modifications cannot be general modifications to the entire building or property, but must be directly associated with the equipment. When Barrett and Gould moved their equipment to this new location in New Hampshire, the company was requested to install a safety barrier around each piece of equipment.
The state agreed to pay for additional safety barriers around the machines because in the previous location, certain machines were situated in such a way that they would either be up against a wall or in some way they would limit access, personnel access to the machines. Whereas in this current location, the way the machines are situated, we had to provide, in order to be up to code, we had to provide a personnel barrier to keep people away from the machine.
Another requirement, increase the general level of lighting in the plant. The physical barriers around the work area of each machine are a reimbursable moving cost since it is a code requirement associated with a specific item of personal property. However, the increased amount of general lighting is not considered a moving cost since it is an improvement to the whole facility. But you could provide some payment for general lighting improvements in a category we call reestablishment. These are additional costs beyond the moving benefits and principally associated with the replacement location as opposed to the personal property. The following are benefits associated with reestablishment of a business. Code work. You can authorize payments to improve or repair the replacement business site to meet any governmental code. For example, remember the discussion about Barrett and Gould's lighting improvements? Payments for code requirements may be the proper category to pay for improved general lighting. Certain modifications to accommodate the business in its replacement location are acceptable costs. You also have the authority to pay for exterior signs identifying the new business location. Advertisement costs that help notify customers and the public of the new business location are approved payments. If the new business expects increased operating costs in the move to a new location, you can pay those higher costs during the first 2 years. This is the only payment that's based on a projection of costs, not the actual cost. All of these costs are associated with reestablishing a business being moved from one location to another. Earlier, we talked about the unlimited amount that can be paid for moving a business. However, the reestablishment costs are limited. Because the reestablishment payment is limited, it is important to determine what should be paid as a moving expense and what should be paid as a reestablishment expense. Before concluding the subject of reestablishment payments, let's look at some items that are not eligible for reimbursement. The first ineligible item covers the purchase of assets such as office equipment, furniture, machines, trade fixtures, and real estate. Under this prohibition, you can't, for example, purchase new desks for an office or hand tools for a workstation. We also cannot buy land, construct buildings, or substantially rehabilitate a building shell. The second category of ineligible items, you can't purchase the raw materials for manufacturing, production supply, or product inventory used in a business. For example, you can't purchase the sheet metal used in a metal stamping process. And the third category, businesses sometimes borrow money to pay for various expenses or to purchase or renovate replacement property. Interest costs associated with borrowed money are not an eligible reestablishment payment. And lastly, you can't pay for any reestablishment benefit to a part-time, in-home business that does not contribute materially or 1. Have gross receipts of at least $5,000, or 2. Have annual net earnings of at least $1,000, or 3. Contribute at least a third of the owner's gross income. Remember, it's your obligation to provide advisory assistance to every business. At a minimum, you should make sure the business has an understanding of all of its potential entitlements, including actual moving costs and reestablishment costs.
Keep in mind that the purpose of the business relocation provisions is to move personal property and assist in the reestablishment of that business. However, there's no guarantee that every business can be relocated.
You should make every effort to pay for all eligible costs to assure the continued economic viability of the business. While the process can get complicated, do your best to examine your options and ask questions to get your agency and the affected business through the process.